There's a certain feeling every Sekiro fan understands. You've just beaten Sword Saint Ishin, one of the hardest bosses in gaming, a final test that demands every skill you've learned throughout the game. And you feel like an absolute master, an unrivaled parrying god. But once the adrenaline fades, you feel something unexpected. Disappointment. Not because the game was lacking, but because it's over. And as you start looking around for what to play next, you quickly realize there's nothing else quite like it. So the search begins. Reddit threads, Steam forums, YouTube comments, all filled with people asking the same question. What now? Again and again, you find the same sentiment. Sekiro ruined combat for me. Nothing else is the same. Sword fights in gaming just feel awful now. I've read these posts. Hell, I've written these posts. And like so many others, I've spent considerable time chasing the feeling Sekiro gave me. This video is about the games I tried, what they got right, what they missed, and how close they came to recreating what made Sekiro so special. Because it's not just the swordplay. It's the way everything from enemy design to Wolf's moveset is built to create the illusion of a duel, where both sides are reacting and adjusting. That illusion of facing an opponent who's reading you as closely as you're reading them is what Sekiro does better than any game I've ever played. And it's what I've been chasing ever since. If you finish Sekiro and immediately run to Google for similar games, one of the first suggestions you'll see is Lies of P, NeoWiz's Pinocchio-inspired Souls-like. It's often described as a mix between Bloodborne and Sekiro, but it clearly leans more towards the former. NeoWiz absolutely nails the gothic Bloodborne-esque aesthetic, but when it comes to combat, Sekiro's brilliance proves harder to replicate. On paper, Lies of P has a lot going for it. There's a posture system, perfect guards, and a staggering mechanic that all look like they belong in a Sekiro-style system. But once you start playing, the cracks begin to show. The first major issue is telegraphing. Lies of P has incredibly tight parry windows, but without the clear visual cues that made those windows manageable in Sekiro. In Sekiro, even the fastest combos are readable once you understand the enemy's rhythm. Every hit feels like something you could have parried. You're reacting, not simply memorizing. Lies of P flips that. Enemies often delay attacks in awkward, unnatural ways, pausing mid-swing just to throw off your timing. It feels less like they're trying to kill you, and more like they're trying to screw with you. And that makes perfect guarding feel less like a test of skill and more like a guessing game. Then there's the stagger system. In Sekiro, the posture bar is always visible. You know how close you are to a death blow and can plan around it. Lies of P tracks stagger but doesn't display it. You're never exactly sure how close you are to a stagger until you're one hit away. And that uncertainty discourages aggression. It introduces hesitation into a system that should be about commitment and precision. But arguably the biggest problem is the lack of animation canceling. In Sekiro, if you press the attack button and realize it was a mistake, you've got a brief window to cancel into a block. It's not totally forgiving. Once you've committed too far, you're locked in. But it gives you that vital split second to course correct if you need it. It keeps the game feeling alive, like a real duel, like you're responding in real time. Lies of P offers no such mercy. Once you press attack, you're committed, even if you instantly regret it. That might work in a slower dodge-based Souls-like, but here, paired with the awkward attack patterns and tight parry timing, it just feels clunky. And the result? A lot of new players try to avoid parrying whenever possible. It's technically optimal, but too often it feels inconsistent, unrewarding, or just not worth the risk. Dodging is often safer, more reliable, and in many circumstances, almost as effective. Sekiro makes parrying feel like mastery. Lies of P makes it feel like you're trying to impress someone who isn't even watching. Now, believe it or not, I genuinely enjoy Lies of P and recommend it often. It's a very solid game. Fun to play, beautiful aesthetic, and one of the better Souls-likes outside of FromSoft. But as a substitute for Sekiro, it falls short. It's a great fit for fans of Bloodborne or traditional Souls-likes, but it doesn't deliver the kind of reactive, rhythm-based feel that made Sekiro so satisfying. It gets a lot of the surface-level mechanics right, but misses the deeper game feel that keeps Sekiro fans coming back for more. Of all the games I've tried since Sekiro, arguably the one that's come closest to capturing its magic is a game very few people have played. Nine Souls is a Metroidvania from a small Taiwanese studio called Red Candle Games, and it's brilliant. As a Metroidvania, Nine Souls isn't trying to be the next Sekiro, but it understands a lot of what made it special. Parries aren't just an option, they're the heart of the combat. The timing is tight and responsive, but the system also gives you grace. Just like in Sekiro, an imperfect parry will still register if you're close enough. But instead of simply blocking when your timing is off, you take what the game calls internal damage, which is a type of recoverable health loss similar to the rally mechanic in Bloodborne. The difference is that rather than attacking to get your health back, you either parry cleanly or simply avoid further damage. And that design philosophy carries over to the rest of combat. Enemy attacks are clearly telegraphed, but what sets Nine Souls apart from other parry-driven games is its movement. Because it's part Metroidvania, mobility plays a much larger role, and it elevates the entire combat system. The dash is fast with generous invincibility frames, letting you reposition instantly, slip through danger, or reset a fight that's not going your way. Add in air mobility, clean visual cues, and the ability to parry mid-air, and you get something that feels fluid, fair, and incredibly rewarding. Another area where Nine Souls shines is in the bosses. The roster is fantastic from start to finish, with each encounter acting as a test of what came before, often demanding mastery of a new mechanic introduced in the zone leading up to it. Ji Quan is an excellent example. His area introduces the Unbound counter, a charged parry that stops powerful red attacks. At first it feels awkward and risky. Charging it under pressure takes nerves. But the game gradually teaches you how to use it, with Ji Quan acting as the final exam. If you want to advance, you must master the technique. No way around it. It's a smart bit of mechanical design, one that rewards repetition with real growth. This is where Nine Souls really excels. Not just the parry system or slick movement, but the way it challenges you to improve and rewards you when you do. Some of the bosses are incredibly tough. You can expect to die repeatedly while you learn the fights. But even at its hardest, Nine Souls always feels fair. When you fail, you understand why. You reacted too slowly, or were overly aggressive and got punished. The result is a game that, while not mimicking Sekiro, still manages to speak the same language. First Berserker Khazan is what you would get if Sekiro and Nioh 2 had a baby that grew up watching anime. It's going for something with more style and spectacle, and that's part of what makes it awesome. The combat is weighty, fast, and responsive, and the defensive tools are some of the best in the genre. You've got Brink Guard, a perfectly timed parry, a Brink Dodge, which is a perfectly timed dash, and both are masterfully implemented, to the extent that either could be used exclusively if you chose. Similar to more traditional Souls-likes, Khazan has a stamina system, but it's less restrictive than many others in the genre. Blocking poorly still drains it, and heavy attacks will chew through it, but dodging costs very little. Especially with the right talents, it's practically free. The result is a system that mainly limits aggression rather than mobility. You're never punished for repositioning, only for overextending. The weapons are great too. Rather than locking you into a single weapon and playstyle like Sekiro, Khazan gives you options. You've got the greatsword, which is slow but hits like a truck, dual wielding, which is fast and aggressive, and the spear, which feels like a solid middle ground between the two. Each one feels distinct, not just in damage but in rhythm, and each comes with a talent tree that further differentiates them. As a result, the gameplay changes dramatically depending on which weapon you choose. It may not have the variety of something like Nioh 2, but the tight focus on a few weapons allowed them to be developed in ways that has rarely been achieved in the genre. It's a case of quality over quantity. In many ways, Khazan feels like a game that learned from the mistakes of Lies of P. While it also lacks attack cancels, the enemy attack patterns are well telegraphed, and the parry timing feels fair and intuitive. You're still locked into a decision, but the information needed to make those decisions is more readily available. So when you are inevitably punished for a bad choice, it seems fair rather than cheap. In terms of combat, Khazan really only stumbles in a few ways. First, due to the leveling system and stat allocation, you aren't forced to engage with the difficulty. Leveling your way through a tough boss is an option rather than mastering the fight. While this isn't a deal breaker, it does give players a way to circumvent the wonderfully difficult bosses that are at the core of the experience. Can't get Malika's timing down? Stuck on Viper? Just go grind until you've trivialized the fights. Of course, this is a minor complaint. It's simply an option and one you're never forced to take. You're still free to suffer through repeated beatdowns, just like God intended. Second is the use of status effects as a difficulty spike. Volbeno is a great example. His fire attacks build up burn even on perfect parries. You can dodge it, but no self-respecting Sekiro veteran wants to dodge. This trend starts with Volbeno and only gets worse from there. Almost every boss has some kind of status effect gimmick you're forced to keep track of. And these aren't just minor annoyances. In many cases, they're death sentences. If the build-up gets too high, you're done. And there's not always an easy way to avoid them. But the biggest issue, and the one that separates Khazan from Sekiro the most, is that enemies don't react to you. They run their patterns whether you're patient or aggressive. Sure, you can stagger them repeatedly if you know what you're doing, but they're still just waiting for their turn, not responding to your play. Even the best fights like Malika, while incredibly fun, never feel like a duel with an opponent who's reacting to you. Khazan has quickly become one of my favorites in the genre and an easy recommendation to anyone who enjoys these types of games. It's not trying to be a straightforward Sekiro clone. Like I said, it shares much of its DNA with Nioh. But what it does do, it does damn well. The most recent game in my quest to relive Sekiro is Stellar Blade. And in many ways, it's the most similar in terms of pure mechanical design. There's no stamina bar to limit your aggression. You have the same responsive cancel window that lets you commit to attacks without feeling locked in, and the parry timing is sharp and intuitive. Enemies telegraph clearly, and the rhythm of combat feels honest. You're reacting to actual threats, not weird gimmicks meant to trip you up. It rewards pressure, and it feels really good to play. But it's not perfect. For one, the difficulty is noticeably softer than other games of its kind. There is a wide margin for error. Where Sekiro demands precision, Stellar Blade often lets you skate by on timing that's good enough. It makes the game more accessible, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it does take some of the edge off the experience. More frustrating is the absence of an option to parry mid-air. The game gives you tools like aerial attacks and a double jump, but then punishes you for using them. Despite Eve's mobility, it's almost always optimal to stand right in front of your opponent and either attack or wait to parry. As a result, the movement options seem disconnected from the combat in a restrictive way, really only useful for platforming challenges. Even an optional talent for airborne parrying, like the mid-air deflect in Sekiro, would have opened up a lot of new opportunities to engage with the combat system. Stellar Blade wanted to be a combination of Souls-like parry timing and Devil May Cry style, but the lack of aerial options really hamper the latter. Eve would have really benefited from a launching technique that sends enemies skyward and gives players a reason to use aerial attacks. This would also help manage groups of enemies, which can be cumbersome to deal with outside of spamming abilities. Of course, this issue isn't original to Stellar Blade. It's an issue with almost all games in the genre. It's not surprising that games focused on one-on-one encounters feel off with multiple opponents. But most titles in the genre throw those situations at you far less frequently than Stellar Blade. And then there's the issue of the Mikiri-style mechanics, specifically Blink and Repulse. On paper, they function like advanced counters, special moves triggered in response to specific enemy attacks. But in practice, they behave more like quick-time events. The enemy flashes a signal, your sword glows, and you press the button in time with the glow rather than in time with the attack. The problem is that you're not actually reacting to your opponent. You're reacting to your own animation cue. It's flashy, sure, but it disconnects you from the fight. The danger becomes secondary to the spectacle. That one detail, the shift from reactive combat to choreographed prompt, perfectly illustrates why Sekiro still stands alone. Stellar Blade understands the structure, but it sometimes misses the spirit. So that wraps up games that try to follow Sekiro's blueprint. But what about games that take a different path? Games that aren't trying to be Sekiro, but still manage to scratch the same itch. And in that category, one stands out immediately. Of all the games I've played since Sekiro, Sifu might come the closest to capturing what made it special. Not because of the mechanics or setting, but because of the feeling it creates when you finally get it. Sekiro makes you feel like an anime ninja when it all clicks. Sifu accomplishes the same thing, but with Chinese kung fu. And that feeling isn't handed to you like in most games. You have to earn it. Sifu's combat is built on systems that reward mastery. It has a structure bar just like posture in Sekiro, and most enemies go down not by draining their health, but by breaking their stance. Parrying is sharp and satisfying, and dodging isn't a roll or a dash like most games in the genre. Instead, you stand your ground and dodge attacks like a Chinese Floyd Mayweather. But where most games on this list focus on one-on-one encounters, Sifu regularly puts you in the middle of a large group. You're not just reacting to a single opponent. You're constantly shifting attention, managing threats from all directions, and adapting on the fly. It can feel overwhelming at first, but when it all comes together, Sifu offers a sense of mastery that no game since Sekiro has achieved. Next up is the most unusual game on the list, Clair Obscur Expedition 33. Clair Obscur isn't a Sekiro-like. It's a turn-based RPG from French studio Sandfall Interactive. But beneath all the surrealism and depression, it hides one of the most interesting defensive systems I've seen in the genre. You don't pick defensive options from a menu. There's no guard option listed under attack. Instead, Clair Obscur gives you timing-based parries, dodges, and even jumps, each mapped to specific attack types and all requiring sharp reads and quick reactions. Parrying is tight and reactive, but high risk, high reward. If you parry every hit in a combo, you're rewarded with a massive counterattack. Dodging is more forgiving. It offers more invincibility frames and is great for learning enemy patterns without being punished too harshly. But it doesn't stop there. The game also introduces what it refers to as gradient counters, special reactive moves that function like Neo's burst counter or Sekiro's Makiri. It's a response-based system wrapped in a turn-based shell, and somehow it works. Clair Obscur turns every encounter into a blend of strategy and timing. And it's an absolute blast to play. I started writing this video a while back and ended up shelving it. At the time, I certainly didn't expect a turn-based RPG to scratch the Sekiro itch. But here we are. Clair Obscur isn't the first RPG to include reactive button presses. Like a Dragon and Sea of Stars both come to mind recently. But no game in the genre has committed to timing mechanics like this one. And the result? A very easy contender for Game of the Year. Now, lastly, I want to mention a small indie project that I thoroughly enjoyed. Bloodless isn't flashy. It doesn't overwhelm you with cinematic finishers or massive boss arenas. But it's sharp, reactive, and a ton of fun to play. You play as a former killer who's chosen non-violence. So instead of killing enemies, you disarm them. Every encounter is about control, about ending the fight before blood is shed. You've got key attacks to apply pressure and a set of unique special abilities, mostly for crowd control, but the core of Bloodless's combat isn't about offense. It's about waiting. The real heart of the system is the dash. There's no shield, no block button. Your parry is a perfectly timed dash into an enemy strike, deflecting the blow and opening them up for a disarm. You can't brute force your way through most fights. You have to wait, watch, and react. In that sense, Bloodless might be the most purely reactive game in the entire video. It's not about pressure, it's about patience. And that's what makes it so satisfying to master. So where does this leave us? After all these games, from ambitious indies to major studio releases, I've seen glimpses of what made Sekiro great. Some games nail the timing, others copy the systems, a few, like Nine Souls or Bloodless, understand some of the spirit. But none of them fully capture what made Sekiro different. Because it's not just about posture meters or parries. Sekiro creates the illusion of a duel with a thinking opponent better than any game ever made. Enemies feel like they're reacting to you, not just running a script. And that's not a knock against the other games. It's a testament to how great Sekiro really was. At this point, it seems unlikely we'll ever get a true sequel to Miyazaki's masterpiece. But maybe, just maybe, someone out there will build a true spiritual successor. Something that doesn't just feel good to play, but feels alive. Until then, the search continues.